violet is a note in perfumery that definitely was an acquired taste for me. It was something that was quite jarring. So violet I see as a cousin to the iris. The iris is soft and whispering, whereas violet can be a little bit, you know, pungent. It's something that sticks out in a composition. Iris is subtle, violet is not. And I have learned to really appreciate violet. I love it to this day. So I'm going to talk about some both popular perfumes as well as more niche perfumes that include the note of violet. So violet, when it comes to interpreting the flower in perfumery, is usually an accord, whereas when we talk about violet leaf, that can be extracted from the actual violet leaf. So it smells a little bit more airy than violet would. Violet is that purple floral that really stands out. It's kind of jazzy, it's kind of electric, whereas violet leaf is a little bit more of a subtle segue into the violet. It's used more in unisex compositions and more masculine compositions, whereas violet is seen as a little bit more vintagey, feminine if we're talking about the classic perfumery. Now, one of the first violet perfumes ever to be created was by Guerlain in 1906, and it is called Après. This one is a watery take on the violet, and I hate to do this, like point out coloring and packaging, but this color on this packaging is actually perfect to describe the scent of Après L'Ondée. You're walking past a bush of violets. They are dewy, they're kind of watery, so you're not getting a super pungent take, but it's more of a light, watery take on violets. I do love this fragrance. It is quite vintage in style. I think that it still prevails today, but it is a little bit vintage in style. The fact that it is watery though makes it easy to bear today without it coming off as full-on vintage perhaps. Some people would describe this fragrance as melancholy. Personally, I don't get any melancholy vibes from this. It is just uplifting for me. It's beautiful. The sillage of this fragrance is, you know, not as huge. Perhaps in the newer bottles it might be. Please leave a comment below if you have an experience with that. But for me, the sillage is quite low, and the longevity of this fragrance is also quite low, maybe 4 or 5 hours. So this is a beginning of the day type of scent for me. And if you are trying to get into violet without being overwhelmed, I would say start off with Après L'Ondée. The next fragrance that we have is Insolence by Guerlain. And this is a more candied direction of the violet. So you're having the violet flower, it's sweetened, it's candy-like, but it still has this magical thing that violet does, this underlying fizziness, this beautiful purple jazziness of the violet flower. And this one, I would say, I'm not personally the biggest gourmand lover, but this does not go full-on gourmand, and I have both the EDT. This one is the EDT. I also have the eau de parfum of this one. The EDT itself is very strong, so you don't need a lot of this fragrance. It gives you that vintage makeup vibe, and then a cross between that and some violet candy, Parma violets. So it is a fun, flirty fragrance. It's one that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to many men. Of course, try it out, but I have not met very many males who like wearing this fragrance. It's usually females, just for those of you who would like to know. And sillage is great, longevity is great. This is the kind of fragrance that makes me happy. It's like, if I want Après L'Ondée, actually this would be a good follow-up after wearing Après L'Ondée, adding this on top, and this would last out into the late afternoon and the evening for me. So, beautiful one. The next fragrance is a popular one, and it is Oud Satin Mood by Maison Kurkdjian. This one I had to, again, learn to love because that violet note to me just stood out. This is a rose and oud fragrance per se, if you look at it from a distance, but that rose is intertwined with violet. And if you have experience with this fragrance and you're wondering what that note is that is sticking out in the dry down of this fragrance, it's the violet. That's what violet smells like. I could not wear this for a long time because that violet just, it was all I smelled every single time. But now I love that aspect of it. This fragrance is very full on though, I will say. It is not the most subtle. No, it's not subtle at all. This is a super loud fragrance because it is that rose and oud, and you've added violet, which is a note that just always stands out so much. You have a power bomb with this fragrance. you could drive people away, you could bring people closer to you depending on whether they like it or not. It's definitely not an inoffensive scent. It's not a scent that I would recommend for office wear, for example. More of an evening scent for me, but that is Satin Mood. The loudest oud from MFK because of that violet. It's also interesting because violet in that composition is equally worn by men and women from my experience. So when you've mixed in some woodiness in there, then it tends to become more of a unisex scent. So Grande Poudre by Yves Saint Laurent is a violet accord fragrance with sage. And this fragrance I find to be extremely classy. It's also one that I would recommend for anyone, completely unisex. And the violet represented here is the violet leaf. So even though this is an accord, it's not an extract of the leaf. And therefore it is completely unisex because it tends to be, you know, a unisex fragrance that has violet leaf. This combination with a sage and with some subtle leatheriness in the dry down, I wouldn't call this a full-on leathery fragrance as it's described, not at all. It's quite minerally when you wear it. I find this one really great for office wear, for daytime wear, because it seems to go with, you know, a nice crisp outfit, and it's a clean smell. It also has some pepperiness in there at the beginning of the fragrance. So it has this subtle mineraliness from these subtle spices, and then with that violet leaf. A really great one from YSL. And then in a similar vein for daytime, but perhaps slightly more feminine leaning, we have Pourpre d'automne by Maison. This is a fragrance that has that violet leaf accord, but it is strongly met by the violet floral accord in the heart of this fragrance. This is a straight up violet fragrance. It has that kind of vintage tinge that violet gives, but this one is a very modern take on the violet. If you are interested in violet and you've tried vintage perfumes that have not worked for you, then perhaps try out Pourpre d'automne. I am obsessed with this fragrance. Longevity, sillage, all of it. This is an all-day wearing fragrance. Spray it on in the morning and it will last you all day long, which is a nice plus because it also still smells very realistic, very beautiful, very nuanced. The dry down of this fragrance is met with some benzoin, so it's slightly comforting and resinous, but it still has a lot of that candy-like violet that you have in Insolence. So it's a nice in-between, I would say, between these two. Now I'm getting super technical. A nice in-between between these two. So daytime appropriate, you can wear it all day, slightly femme-leaning, very nice. Now the next one is a fun one because it actually has violet leaf oil in it if you are trying to smell the real deal. Except here it is blended with this sugary almond. It's called Confetti by Lush. So it's based on, you know, the throwing the confetti at Italian weddings. So it's fun, it's bombastic, it's that jarring violet and then with this sugary almond. So it smells like a kind of cake. In Denmark we have this marzipan cake and it reminds me of marzipan actually. So this one is a fun violet leaf. I can't stop smelling it. I don't know why. It's like one of those scents for me that I love to smell in the bottle, not so much wear, but perhaps for you, you would love to wear it as well. Now we have another fragrance containing that violet leaf, but in a very unique way, as they do all of their things, by Min New York. We have Shaman. So this is meant to be a love potion, but this is like violet leaf in a smoky cloud, except it's not smoky. This is violet leaf that's portrayed in this cloud that you've stepped into. It's very unusual. I enjoy this one for daytime wear, but up to you. This is one that I would recommend to all males who are looking to try some violet. Hands down, no problems, nothing femme about this at all. It is, yeah, just a very cool take on violet. You've got some patchouli infused into there as well. So it has that kind of woodiness, mossiness, slight greenness. This is just a lot of complexity in a fragrance. It is a wonderful wear because every time you get a whiff of it, you're like, ooh, smelling different facets of it. Very cool fragrance. Shaman by, or Shaman by Min New York. Man, these names, this is like the hardest thing about being a fragrance reviewer, the names. Then lastly, we're going to round off with a wonderful other unisex take on Violet. This is the Violet Leaf Accord, and it is a punchy one. This is called Violet Shot by Olfactive Studio. I now only get the small versions of these because they're so punchy. I mean, this is an extrait de parfum. You don't need very much of it, and it just lasts like a mofo. Sorry. So Violet Leaf here is met with, for me, prominent saffron and this vanillic touch in the base of this fragrance. So it also becomes quite warm. This is that purple power that I was talking about, that electrifying violet, if you will. And yeah, very strong, wonderful take on Violet Leaf. Goes a little bit sweet, adds also some of that patchouli to give it that unisex vibe. Definitely a great one. One of the standouts from the shot line, because Violet is just so unusual. It's a scent, like I said, that not a lot of people understand or appreciate, so it is more of a either love or hate type of note in perfumery. I do hope that you enjoyed this video from me today about Violet. Please share your favorite Violet Leaf or Violet Accord fragrances down below. This is a community where we chat, share ideas, because obviously I'm not going to have every single fragrance on the planet. I'm not Sebastian from Smelling Good Fragrances or whatever. So please leave your comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you have not already and you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one.